Hey everybody, Grayson here. Welcome back to another week of my new call-in streaming news and science show. Very happy to be here with you again for week number 2. Thank you everyone that watched last week. Thank you everyone. Sorry for that mistake. There we go. I got the stream muted. I will promise that as we keep going, I will get better and better at this. I swear. Okay. So, welcome back to another week. As you may have noticed, I was not raptured in the eclipse. I am just as disappointed as you guys are, but unfortunately, the reason that I was not raptured is because it was cloudy where I was trying to view the eclipse from. So I'm still here on Earth, stuck here with all of you. Just kidding. Actually, to my knowledge, nobody was raptured. Wasn't that a huge surprise? So yes, I tried to find footage, guys, from Rapture, Indiana, where the fundamentalists were saying that the rapture was going to be starting at the eclipse or whatever they were saying. I actually couldn't find any footage from rapture. I don't know if it was just too cloudy or if nothing happened and they all just felt too disappointed and too embarrassed that none of them actually bothered to upload any footage of it. There didn't seem to be any huge crowds in rapture. So, kind of disappointing if you're a big rapture head out there, but I did manage to find one pretty hilarious story for the eclipse that really made me laugh. So we're going to get to that here. But first of all, my eclipse was very cool. Let me know in the comments if you guys saw the eclipse and how it was for you. Basically, I went to the Texas Eclipse Festival, which was a ton of fun all weekend. They had a big drone show where they had the drones reenact an eclipse. It was really cool. It was probably the best drone show that I've seen so far in my life. But then, due to severe weather, they ended up canceling the festival on the morning of the eclipse. So, all 40,000 people had to disperse and find their own way to look at the eclipse. I ended up pulling off to the side of the highway in the middle of central Texas. Not even really a highway, just like a kind of rural road, and it was completely international. There were 2 German astronomers there that I talked with. There were 6 deaf Italians with some really cool equipment to capture the eclipse, and I was like, "Well, look, if all these people picked this spot, this must be a good spot." I was wrong, okay? It was 2 hours of clear skies, and then right at before totality started, the clouds started rolling in, and it basically blocked my view of the total eclipse until the very, very last, like, 4 seconds. I got a little bitty glimpse, but it was cool because of the cloud cover. I didn't even need glasses to see it. I could see it with my own naked eye, so it was still a very special experience, but unfortunately the clouds got in the way of me getting raptured. So that was my experience. Let me know yours. But I want to share with you this hilarious, take it with a grain of salt because it is from Reddit. So it's not, you know, just take it with a grain of salt, basically, because we don't know if this is really a real story. It's not like a news article or whatever. But look, this was on the atheism subreddit. So this is from a restaurant server, and this is a follow-up post. So they've had 2 posts from the previous week of this woman who was coming in and tipped this Reddit user $300 on a $40 meal, and then went back and tipped her coworker $777 because, and I quote from the previous post, 777 is God's number. And this woman was convinced that the rapture was coming on April 8th, the day of the eclipse. And they tipped over $1,000 at this restaurant. So then flash forward to Tuesday, the day after the eclipse, when, spoiler alert, the rapture did not happen. And the woman came back and was trying to insist that the tips were fraudulent and were tampered with, and she was demanding a refund. Very Christian like behavior, I must add. But this woman did not get her refund. They insisted, they don't do refunds for tips because of tax purposes. And this woman, here we go, stormed angrily back to her Mercedes. So Really hilarious stuff here in this post. Just pretty characteristic behavior, I would say. I was hoping that there would be more hilarious news stories of fundamentalists who were convinced that the rapture was going to happen on Monday, but this was the only one that I came across. So let me know if you guys have any hilarious footage or stories from people just acting up because they think the end of the world is coming. And then obviously it doesn't come. I mean, we know that literally since the days of Jesus, Christians have been saying that the end of the world is going to happen soon within our lifetimes. Like every single generation of Christians from Jesus till today has been saying that same thing. So that was a recap on the eclipse. That was probably one of the bigger news stories that kind of consumed the culture of humanity for the last week. Everybody was talking about the eclipse, especially here in North America. But even for science, it was a little bit of a slower week for science news in general. Just I feel like the eclipse was really on the forefront of everyone's mind. But I wanted to provide an update from last week with those DESI results, the dark energy spectroscopic instrument, because I did have a chance to talk with my cosmology professor, who was a team lead at the DESI collaboration, and getting to see and hear from him firsthand what the experience was like was amazing. Apparently, he was the first person to see these results. When the data got released to the scientists, he stayed up all night in the hotel with a few of the other researchers analyzing this data and plotting it. And he was the first one to get to see the groundbreaking discovery of these DESI results that dark energy potentially changes over time. And I didn't say last week, I didn't say which direction it was changing, but it is getting weaker. So dark energy, rather than just being constant, which was the leading consensus, is actually seems to be getting weaker as the universe continues to expand. So this has pretty big implications, guys. Like in terms of the future trajectory of the universe. If dark energy is getting weaker, then the expansion of the universe would be accelerating less quickly until eventually, if this trend continues, the acceleration would slow and begin decelerating and eventually could even start to collapse back in on itself. So, for the last 25 years, the consensus has been that the universe would just continue to accelerate in its expansion forever, essentially. And these results could paint a different future where that acceleration could slow down and even potentially reverse in the future. We're going to need more data to be able to say either way, but getting to hear from my professor firsthand about what it was like to be the first to realize this at 6 a.m. in his hotel room was really, really cool. And, getting to talk to a guy like that and ask him questions is just, it's a peak experience. So, now again, if you guys don't remember the format for this kind of streaming show, we're going to first talk about the news updates, the news from the last week. We're going to talk about what was new for science in the last week, and then we're going to transition to more of a call-in show format. So if you guys have any questions for me, not just about what was covered on this stream, but any questions in general, please call in. You can, if you want to debate a topic with me, you could call in. And we're going to open up for those call-ins in the back half, but you can go ahead and join now. I'll be able to see you in the StreamYard, but I'm going to open it up for the call-ins in the back half of this. So let's just get to the news. What was new in the world for this week that was relevant to humanity? So we all know that the largest conflicts going on in the world right now are between Israel and Gaza, between Russia and Ukraine, and then there are some conflicts like in Myanmar and Sudan. Um, but this week, turns out, could have been a turning point in the Israel-Palestinian conflict. Last week, we touched on how those aid vehicles were drone striked by Israel, and actually, that seems to be having a bigger effect than I originally thought it would, for some kind of disappointing reasons, right? Like more people have died in the Israel-Gaza conflict than all the other conflicts this year so far. It's by far the deadliest in the world right now, deadlier than the Ukraine-Russia conflict, which is still quite hot. Um, but despite all that death, the Biden administration hasn't really done anything strong to try and put pressure on Israel to stop it. They haven't made any kind of policy threats or anything. It's mostly just been rhetoric and Biden calling Bibi Netanyahu an asshole, and that's about the strongest of a condemnation that has happened. But last week was different with those aid workers getting killed. There were like 7 aid workers that were killed compared to, the tens of thousands of Palestinians that have been killed. But these aid workers were different because they were part of an organization, and one of them that was killed, I believe, was pretty popular in Washington D.C. as a chef. Apparently, all the politicians loved this guy. He like introduced, some of like the really top quality restaurants in D.C. Washington D.C. is not known for having a very good restaurant scene. So all these politicians knew this guy. They loved this guy. They loved eating his food, and for his organization to have been airstriked by Israel and killed, this ruffled some feathers in DC. They're like, no, not my tamale guy, not, or maybe I think it was tapas. I think he opened the first tapas restaurant in Washington DC, and so now all these politicians, their jimmies are rustled, and they're like, wait a minute, but that guy was one of my favorite chefs in DC. And so now all of a sudden, now politicians are coming out strongly opposed to the conflict and opposed to Israel's conduct. Like I think Nancy Pelosi came out and said, and I think Elizabeth Warren too said that this will be remembered as a genocide. And so Biden got on the phone with Netanyahu after this food worker, these vehicles were struck. And after that phone call, Netanyahu appears to have withdrawn a substantial amount of Israeli soldiers out of Gaza. Now, I think there's only one brigade that's still stationed in Gaza, and they've relaxed their presence a lot more. And it just seems like some actual material differences are coming out. Apparently, that was the tipping point. That was the point too far. Was killing this guy that people in DC, they liked eating his tapas. So they didn't really care for all the Gazans, but this guy was a bridge too far, and Biden stepped in and said, and he threatened for policy changes to happen if Israel did not change its conduct. So I guess this was this was it. This is what actually got the Biden administration to act. But at the moment, it seems like maybe they're moving towards a ceasefire. Hamas said that they didn't have the 40 hostages for the ceasefire, meaning that there are not 40 hostages left alive. So I don't know where these ceasefire talks are going to go, but we could be moving in a good direction towards some kind of peace, but you have to ask yourself, what does the day after that peace look like? And I don't think anybody knows what that peace is going to look like for Gaza, for Israel. I don't really think that anybody has thought this through very well about how they're going to maintain peace the day after. So although we're moving in a relatively good direction, it seems like people are still dying. I mean, I think almost a dozen people were killed today just in Israel and or in Gaza, and even in Rafah, which was supposed to be a safe city. So the airstrikes continue, even though the troop presence has been relaxed. I think the leader of Hamas this last week, his 3 sons and grandchildren were killed in an airstrike. So that's not exactly an olive branch. That's not really going to entice Hamas leadership towards peace. But yeah, I mean, that's certainly a situation to keep your eyes on. Meanwhile, Ukraine and Russia continues to be pretty hot. Russia just did a strike on one of the biggest power plants near the Kyiv region. So yeah, it looks like the Russia-Ukraine conflict is not winding down by any means, even though Israel and Gaza might potentially be winding down, which is good for everyone. Although we did mention last week that Israel did strike that Iranian general, and the US intelligence this week has been warning to expect an Iranian response at some point this week. So they've been apparently getting intelligent reports that there could be an Iranian act of either terrorism, military response. Something is going to go down this week against Israel and potentially even here in the United States. So, U.S. intelligence has been warning about that this week. So, that's something to keep you up at night. Hopefully, Iran does not get enticed into this conflict, and the conflict, just as it's starting to wind down, ramps up into a whole regional affair. That would really suck for all of humanity at that point. And yes, Tyler, thank you for the reminder to everyone. Don't forget to hit that like button. We are getting through the news. That was sort of the news on the international front. And then, this week, I mean, we actually kind of had a little bit of optimistic news here from Israel withdrawing a lot of their troop presence from Gaza to some optimistic news here in the US that really kind of made me a little happy. And that was coming from Arizona because, this 2024 election, I mean, the person who sits at the presidency of the US is a big deal. I mean, that's a lot of power that affects the course of humanity in a lot of big ways. And I was kind of worried that Trump's odds, especially with this polling data that's been going on since like November, I was a little worried about the 2024 election. But this week, my worries were assuaged, and I'm feeling a lot more confident about it now, specifically because of one state, and that's the state of Arizona. So, probably a lot of you have already heard by now, but the Arizona Supreme Court recently ruled that in the absence of Roe v. Wade, that an 1864 law goes into effect, which is a complete and utter ban of abortion of all kinds, no exceptions of any kind. It is probably one of the most draconian laws in the country. I mean, it's literally from 1864, before Arizona was even a state. So this law is going into effect in 60 days, and the Republican legislature voted to not to challenge it, not to create a new law, but that's going to be the new law of the land in Arizona, and it's going to be on the ballot in November. If you've been keeping up with any of the abortion ballot initiatives, even in like the most red states, like in Kentucky, in Montana, in Ohio, every time that abortion is on the ballot, it gets the voice of the people, the majority, express that they want to keep abortion legal. So the fact that abortion is going to be on the ballot in Arizona in November is huge. That's going to cause a huge turnout of a lot of people that maybe otherwise would not have go out to vote, specifically like younger women. And I just do not see all of these younger women going to vote for Trump. Like, in order for Trump to win this 2024 election, he absolutely needs the support of people that are pro-choice. He cannot win with just pro-lifers alone. There simply are not enough of them in the country. There are not enough of them in Arizona. Like, something like, maybe 30% of Arizona is pro-life and 70% pro-choice. I mean, this is horrible news for Trump, right? And he's trying to come out, and he was trying to express moderate views about abortion and say it's a states' right issue, which just pissed off people on both sides, honestly. Like, a lot of the really far right conservatives they don't want any exceptions for any kind. They just want abortion banned across the board. They're mad at Trump for being too moderate. Well, this is exactly what you get when you when you have a bunch of crazy far right fundamentalists in charge, and they're just shot themselves in the foot, honestly. Like, if Arizona goes for Trump, or sorry, if Arizona goes for Biden, Trump really does not have a very clear path to victory in 2024. Like, basically, before this ruling, Biden needed the three swing states in the Rust Belt. He needed absolutely to win Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Now, Biden can afford to lose one of those. I mean, Pennsylvania seems like almost a lock for Biden at this point. I mean, the Dems are doing so well in Pennsylvania. The polling numbers are massively in favor of Biden right now, that it seems like it's a lock. I mean, Biden's path to victory is so much more assured now that abortion is on the ballot in Arizona. It's looking like it's going to be Rovember, guys. So I wanted to show you this clip just to show you who we're dealing with here in the Arizona legislature. You might have already seen this, but it was just honestly too perfect and hilarious not to show. So this is from the Arizona legislature floor, like where they actually are doing the votes. And this was just before they were going to vote whether they were going to keep this 1864 law in place or whether they were going to replace it with something more moderate. And it was in the Republicans' interest to replace this with something maybe more similar to like what Florida did with like a heartbeat bill or something that's a little bit more palatable so they don't get absolutely blown out in November when the entire state of Arizona comes out against this and votes the Republicans out. But no, they couldn't help themselves. This is who we're dealing with in the Arizona legislature. So this is a video of them in a prayer circle before the voting happens on the congressional floor, speaking in tongues. Let me know if you can hear this. Hmm. Let me see. I don't know if it's playing. Let me refresh this, guys. I don't know. Seem to have technical difficulties here for a second. Let it be so, Father God. Let it be so. Let it be right now, we just release the presence of the Lord in the Senate chamber. We just release the hovering glory of God Almighty in the Senate chamber. We just pray right now, Lord God, over every desk. Yeah. Oh my God. Please release the hovering glory of the Lord in this Senate chamber. Literally, speaking in tongues at the Senate chamber. Like, this is Looney Tunes. Like, this is absolutely insane. These are the people that we're dealing with. It doesn't seem like they're capable of making actual, like, realpolitik calculus about what's better for their own interests politically. It seems like they just are having to shoot themselves in the foot because of their religious principles on this one. And I am all for it, guys. This was like, this is one of the greatest news updates that I could have seen. Like, I went from being worried about the election to now I'm just eating popcorn. I'm watching this unfold. Like, now it seems like Arizona might be a lock for Biden. And if that's the case, if the Republicans are unable to do something to fix this, and if the question of abortion is actually on the ballot in November in Arizona, Trump is screwed. Like, that's basically almost no path to victory for him. So yes, it is important. Highball, still go out and vote, but like, I'm not going to be losing much sleep at this point. I mean, this is, I don't know. This is great news for the country, I thought, and that footage was absolutely bonkers, like completely crazy. So those were some of the big news articles uh, domestically for the US as well as internationally from this week. So let's kind of transition to what was new in science this week. Um, Last week, I felt like was a major week, a lot of groundbreaking science coming out. This week was a bit more subdued. I think a lot of attention in popular science was devoted to the eclipse. Um, and there were a lot of measurements that were done of this eclipse because it was an eclipse that was corresponding to near the solar maximum in that 11-year cycle. So this was like a much larger corona, and opportunities to measure the sun's corona and the protuberances. There was a lot of scientific research done on the eclipse this week. So that stuff is not published yet, but I do know that there were a lot of scientists monitoring the eclipse this week. And so um, on the day of the eclipse, I think, or maybe it was slightly after the next day. But physicist Peter Higgs passed away. So he was, I think, 94. So it's not like this was sudden or that unexpected. But Higgs is a name that will be remembered in the history of physics for, you know, hopefully the next millennia to come, as we get there, because this was the guy that first theorized the Higgs mechanism, the Higgs field, the Higgs particle that are all named after him, that are sometimes called the God particle. But I know that Higgs himself disagreed with that nomenclature, and there's not that much God about them. It's a particle that it really is very transitory. It's not like these particles exist very often in the actual natural world. It's more the Higgs field that pervades space, and it's the interactions with this Higgs field that give particles mass. So yeah, Peter Higgs was an absolute titan in the field. I've seen, a lot of memorandums to him, acknowledges to him. R.I.P. Peter Higgs, one of the biggest living physicists, I guess, up until Monday. One of the biggest names, certainly going to be in the history books. I mean, the prediction of the Higgs boson in the '60s. Not many scientists get to wait 50 years for a prediction that they made when they were 30 to then come true, with one of the largest, most expensive, most intricate machines ever designed by humanity, which was designed to test his prediction. And then they found it. I mean, I still remember where I was when the Higgs boson was announced. I had a bet going with another student about whether or not the Higgs boson was going to be found. And if the terms of the bet was, if they found the Higgs boson, he was going to have to eat his hat. So I was super elated whenever they found the Higgs, not just because it was a huge scientific discovery, but because I was going to get to see my friend eat his hat, which he only ate like a tiny little piece. I felt like I got ripped off, to be honest. But c'est la vie. Now, the only other major science paper that I wanted to highlight this week before we open this up for call-ins, and sorry, Riv, if the stream was making you sad. I thought this was more positive news, but maybe people's behavior, speaking in tongues and wanting their rapture tips back, is bumming you out. Sorry for that, but uh, the other big science, I mean, not really big, but the science that I wanted to highlight this week that I thought was at least worth shouting out, because I find it to be entertaining at the very least, and something fun to highlight and talk about, was this paper here, which is kind of, sociology, psychology, predicting political beliefs with polygenic scores for cognitive performance and educational attainment, published in Intelligence. So this made me laugh out loud when I saw it, because look at their major takeaways here. So within families, they were testing largely within siblings. Intelligence predicts left-wing beliefs. So uh, DNA-based predictors of IQ, as well as IQ tests, predicted political beliefs within families. Our results imply that being genetically predisposed to be smarter causes left-wing beliefs. So this was absolutely hilarious. Um, oh wow, I did not know much about the journal Intelligence, so I'm glad Zach B. Hancock pointed out Intelligence is a raced realist journal. Big yikes on them. Again, this Intelligence, this article here, I'm sure it's problematic. I'm just highlighting it because I thought it was very funny, and I wanted to take the opportunity to share this with some of my right wing relatives just for bragging rights, because basically they looked at IQ tests and see if those correlated with more liberal left wing politics or lower amounts of authoritarian leanings, and they did find that positive correlation. And then they also looked at what they described here, and maybe this is getting into a little bit of problematic areas. They said that they picked genes that are associated with intelligence. So, you know, take them with a grain of salt, but they said that those also correlated with more left wing beliefs and lower degrees of authoritarianism. So I just was having fun sharing this around my right wing family members this week. Particularly, it brought to mind this video, this famous quote here that I wanted to share because it sounds a lot like what we're. It reminded me of this.
We won with poorly educated. I love the poorly
educated. I love the poorly educated. Yes, we know you do. So yeah, and oh, here you go. A little bit more clarification there. Intelligence, the journal, was founded by an ex-Nazi. Big yikes. All right. So yeah, take anything from the journal Intelligence with a massive grain of salt. But to my knowledge, that this was not the first time that they've shown a correlation between intelligence and generally uh, more left wing political leanings or lesser amounts of authoritarian leanings. So yeah, we all know that Trump loves the poorly educated, and they love him. Yes, they do. So I'm going to open it up now to anyone that wants to call in for any comments on anything that has been talked about or anything that's on the channel, anything in the realms of science, news, politics, philosophy, anything that's on your mind. If you've got a comment, if you've got a question, if you've got something that you want to argue about, by all means, the link to join is pinned in the comments. Oh, and here we go. Leophilius joining in to say that he has a cache of literature showing the correlation between intelligence and education and more left-leaning politics. So like I was saying, this is like been shown in the literature multiple times. It's not just in this recent article in Intelligence. I think maybe the problematic part about that was trying to associate it with specific genes and trying to say that there was a genetic underpinning towards not just intelligence, but authoritarianism and left and right wing political leanings. But yeah, I mean, the general trend of associating intelligence and education with more left leaning politics is pretty decently established in a lot of previous literature as well. So far, we've got no one calling in. So I'm going to continue to interact with the chat here. We can continue to talk about any news stories, either in science or just in world news that you felt that I missed this week. It was generally a little bit of a slower week. And if nobody decides to call in again, then I'm just going to start talking about some of the recent rabbit holes that I've been going into in terms of research, because I'm always reading, like, I've got like 50 tabs open on Wikipedia at any one time, just reading about random things that I find interesting. So there's literally like endless amounts of that. I mean, I always am wondering, should I make this into a based theory video? Is there enough to talk to about here? So don't worry, guys. We won't run out of things to talk about. And Mr. Anderson is here too. You guys should check out his channel. He does great debates against these creationists. He said, what would be really interesting if there's a correlation between death rates and vaccine denial? Yeah, well, there absolutely is. I mean, you guys can look forward to me doing a video debunking Jordan Peterson. He recently had a debate with Destiny where he brought up so many stupidly incorrect things, not just about like philosophy. They talked about like politics as well, but he was talking specifically about climate change and then about vaccines. And like, honestly, Jordan Peterson has to be either lying or just scientifically illiterate to be saying the things that he was saying. Like, he kept asking, oh, Destiny, what's causing these excess death numbers? It has to be the vaccine. And it's like, dude, it's literally COVID. Like, are you serious? I mean, he like literally just is incapable of reading data. Like the COVID rates and the excess death rates were almost perfectly in sync. And this man is like, I think it's the vaccines that are causing the excess deaths. So, yeah, this is why you don't turn to psychologists for your public health or your understanding of climate science. Um, yeah, exactly. Highball. What? Something that Jordan Peterson said is dumb? I mean, yeah, I honestly cannot think of somebody who says more words with saying less substance than Jordan Peterson. The man can talk for 20 minutes and say absolutely nothing. Um, let's see. Uh Skogmos asked, "Hey, can we prove Christianity is Jewish beyond doubt?" Not sure what you are exactly asking with that, Skogmos. Maybe if you want to call in, we could talk about that. It sounds like an interesting topic. I mean, originally early Christianity, like the Christianity of Jesus, was Jewish. I mean, Jesus would not have identified himself as a different religion other than Judaism. His apostles also would not have considered themselves to be a different religion. They were Jewish. They thought that they had the correct reading of the Jewish scriptures and were anticipating the end of the world brought about by the Jewish God. They thought that Jesus was the Messiah, but the Jewish Messiah. It really wasn't until Paul kind of split from this opinion and decided to start preaching to Gentiles as well, and that you didn't have to be Jewish to be a follower of Jesus, that it kind of took on its mind of its own as its own independent religion. Um, so I don't know about proving Christianity is Jewish beyond doubt, because there are many aspects of Christian theology that are distinctly not Jewish. So, um, yeah, that's true. I mean, Jordan Peterson probably doesn't care about being factually accurate at this point. He is getting rich off of idiots. So, there's really no incentive for Jordan Peterson to care about the veracity of the things that he says. Um, Yeah, speaking about like race realism or race science, these are some topics that I would be interested in debating in the future. If there's any race realists out there that want to argue that race is biologically real, um, good luck with that one. I don't think anyone that has an understanding of genetics would be taking up that opinion if they were intellectually honest. So it's pretty easy with genetics to prove that race is not biologically a real thing. It's a real thing, just like socially, culturally real, not biologically real. Um, so yeah, I've always wanted to do like race realism conversations and debates, but so far the opportunity has not come up. So it's something that I'm open to doing. Um, so hopefully, I can find someone that's actually dumb enough to believe in race realism. so so far, I've found a lot of dumb ones out there. I'm sure that I've talked to some race realists, like that guy Bubblegum Gun, um, the polytheist. So the only polytheist I know, and he literally believes that each race has their own gods and was created specially. So he believes in creationism, but like each race has their own different gods that created them separately. It's like literally even a step beyond young earth creationism. Like it's like, I mean, he doesn't even believe that dogs came from wolves. He thinks chihuahuas were specially created. So this is the caliber of race realists, guys. I mean, this is where they're at. um Maya says that they're not hard to find, so maybe I've just been lucky enough to not run into these people, or at least if I have, they haven't been expressing their race realist opinions. But yeah, if you could find a race realist that's willing to debate me, send out the feelers and let them know that I want to debate these topics. Um, Faroum says that they love my content. Thank you very much for the compliment. And they loved Mr. Anderson's debate against Kent. Yeah, I mean, Mr. Anderson is a great debater. He's a lawyer, so yeah, his are great to watch. I agree. Um, I killed Earl says my Chihuahua is special, but I'm not sure if it's that kind of special. Yeah. Um, Zach's his biological race video is probably the best one on YouTube. If you haven't watched it, check out Zach's channel. He's a population geneticist and he breaks down why race is not biologically real. He goes through multiple different definitions of what could be like a biologically real distinction, like a subspecies or like a monophyletic group, like, and he just tears it apart that it could be each of them. In fact, next week, Zach Hancock and myself will be on Reasons to Doubt channel specifically to talk about race realism. So put that one down. That's going to be a really fun discussion. Yeah, this is true. Maybe if I make a video specifically about how race is not biologically real, like Zach did, then maybe my comments and inbox too can be flooded with race realists. that doesn't that actually does not entice me to make that video, to be honest. Um, Pedro was asking, what is the realist part means? That means that they believe that race is real in a biological sense. They're a race realist because they're like, no, but race is biological, wah, wah, wah. And they don't really care what the actual biology and genetics showed. So, um, let's see. Sterling said, studies have shown that Black and white Americans are more genetically similar than Black Americans and Black Africans are. Similarly, with Ashkenazi Jewish and non Jewish Americans and Middle East. I'm not sure on the specifics of that, but yeah, I mean, just a quick comparison of the genetic similarities of different groups is enough to quickly dispel any such notion of race realism. I mean, there are Africans that are more closely related to Europeans than to other Africans. Like Aboriginal Australians are in the black category racially, but like Europeans are more closely related to Africans than Aboriginal Australians are. So the whole concept just makes no sense from a genetic biological approach. Um, uh, Faroum is sorry for being 5 minutes behind, but yeah, they're looking forward to my Peterson debunk video. Yeah, I've been promising it for a while. I just haven't gotten around to it because honestly, like Peterson just brings up so many things that it's hard to just pick on like certain things to debunk because the video could be like 2 hours long with all the stuff that he says that's just so factually wrong and stupid. Um, Riv Bank was saying that I should make the race realism video. Well, we'll see. Sydney Raptors said, I heard yesterday that Chihuahuas were a good example of directed evolution. They were bred to be able to be fitted in a taco. That is that's actually not that wrong. I mean, there is thinking that they were bred so that they could be very portable snacks. So sorry I killed Earl about your Chihuahua, but makes a delicious hiking snack. Tanya Brown said that likely there wasn't a big crowd at Rapture, Indiana, because none of what they were saying was biblical, and most Christians thought they were kooky or wrong. That's great. That's great for most Christians, restoring faith in humanity. But yeah, I mean, I think generally the rapture is non-biblical. I mean, like the idea of an apocalypse is very biblical. I mean, Jesus was definitely an apocalyptic preacher, but the actual idea of like a rapture and people ascending, going up to heaven, and yeah, all the details of the rapture, I don't think that those were around until like the 19th century. So those are much more recent, based on let's say some fast and loose interpretations of the Bible. Um, Yes, Pedro, race is a categorization. It's just not a biological one. It's a socio-cultural categorization. Um, yes, as Earl's Chihuahua stares absently at her. um, and it's pronounced forum. Okay, I will remember that forum. Thank you. Um, Maybe Kent should debate Bubblegum Gun about his wife's pug that he hates so much. I would actually love to see a Bubblegum and Kent debate. For Kent to debate a polytheist who like rejects evolution even more than Kent does, because Kent's worldview has like super evolution. It's got like evolution from all the critters on Noah's Ark to what we have today. It's got dogs from wolves. And Bubblegum is just like, no, you're an evolutionist, Kent Hovind. And like, I love it anytime Bubblegum debates creationists because their heads just explode. Like they get such a dose of their own medicine talking to this guy that they literally just like they get to see what it's like talking with them, and it almost causes them to have like just this like rude awakening of like realizing how stupid and annoying they actually are. Um, Tolkienomics says that I see the mitochondrial haploid groups aren't indicators of homogeneous populations distinctly evolving over time prior to global admixture variables. Um, the mitochondrial haploid groups are not races. That's not a race. That's a haploid group. Doesn't really have anything to do with the conception of race. Haploid groups are real, but again, there's not really any monophyletic group of humans on Earth. There's not really a time prior to global admixture. Like there's always been admixture between different human populations for all of human history. There is no monophyletic subspecies of humans on the earth. Um, and Let's see. Feel free to think. What can we say to people who say we are conspiracy theorists? Then, after given evidence, they say, "How do you know that is even true?" Yeah, that happens to me all the time. You say something that's like a basic fact, um, and then you'll have like a flat earther or a creationist say, "Oh, but how do you know that?" And then if you don't have like a really in-depth knowledge of like in the history of empirical science, then you know it can basically cause you. I mean, I actually like when this happens because when I don't know something, like sometimes like a flat earther or a creationist will ask me a question that I generally hadn't thought of before because what they're saying is just so simple that it's like, if you say something about um I don't even know what a good example, but you'll say something that is just a common understood fact, and they'll be like, "Well, how do you know that?" And then if you don't know how to answer to that, it kind of causes you to go back and do some additional reading, and you can learn new things about not just the history of science, but about like the empirical foundations of something that is common knowledge, and it causes you to like learn more about the world. So I actually like these moments. Typically, I would say like you don't have to know everything. You don't have to give them an answer right away. You could say, that's a good question. Actually, let me do some more research and get back to you. And that can cause you to learn something new, as well as to be able to convey that new thing that you learned to answer um, their very stupid point. So yeah, I mean, I love learning new things. That's one of the best outcomes of a debate, in my opinion, is when you can learn something new and actually get stumped and have to go and do further research and learn new stuff. Um, and I Killed Earl's Chihuahua is huge by Chihuahua standards, part Italian Greyhound. Wow, and a Chihuahua on stilts. That's painting quite a picture. I'm not gonna lie. I don't think that would make a very good snack. Kind of too skinny, not enough meat on those legs. Um, yeah, Sydney was pointing out the double dumb gun. Bubblegum argues that created Dalmatian kind has no transitional species from wolves. Gotcha, evolutionists. Yes. And when I have shown him the ancient dog specimens that are transitional between wild wolves and modern domestic breeds of dogs, then he basically just says, no, those aren't transitional. How do you know that they're transitional? It's basically exactly what was just brought up by Feel Free to Think. And then you go through what anatomically is transitional about these, and then he just says, no, you see, you still have no answer. So yeah. Pedro asked, are they conflating species with race? Yeah, I mean, a lot of the times I have heard the race realists talk about how different races are subspecies of humans, which by definition are like monophyletic groups. And so, again, I would direct you guys to Zach Hancock's video about this because he specifically debunks the notion that they are subspecies or, that there are different subspecies of humans. There are no monophyletic groups of humans. Um, Feel Free to Think gives an example. It says that we say they are manipulating crime statistics by way of allowing criminals to walk. Then we use stats from the same people to prove other positions. Maybe if you have something that you want to discuss specifically for this, I think that maybe this is a little bit too much in detail for me to know exactly what you're talking about here. So I'm not exactly able to follow this. But again, you guys, the link is pinned. If you want to discuss anything, join the StreamYard, and you can discuss any topic that you want. It can be anything that I've covered in any of my previous videos, anything from science, news, politics, philosophy, anything that you'd like to discuss about. Riv is saying that he bets the inside of creation heads sound like a tractor from the 1800s. Okay. Do other animals have a race concept? Certainly in social animals, you do have sort of us versus them kind of tribalistic distinctions, which could be seen as sort of a version of race. I mean, the whole concept of race just basically comes from an us versus them mentality, which interestingly enough, actually, the neurotransmitter and hormone oxytocin is actually somewhat related to this. Lots of people think that oxytocin is just like the love chemical, and when you stare into someone who you love, if you stare into their eyes, your brain releases a lot of oxytocin, and it's seen as the increasing these lovey-dovey feelings of belonging and romantic and social bonds with your friends and family and romantic partners. And oxytocin does do all that. But crucially, it only does that for people that you consider your in group already. So the us version of the us versus them dichotomy. For the other people, the people that you would consider in your out group, the people that you would perceive as others or the thems, it actually makes you a lot more suspicious, a lot more aggressive and territorial. Kind of like, you're defending your loved ones against all those strangers in the world. And so if you were just going to unethically dose everybody in the world with a bunch of oxytocin, it would not result in some kind of lovey-dovey hippie kind of thing. Like, it would result in a lot of aggression and violence against different groups. So it's kind of a misconception about oxytocin that is pretty common. I Killed Earl says that most animals have a sense that something else is alive and distinct from themselves, but the prevalence of altruism in nature tells me probably not. Um, I don't know if most animals have a sense that something else is alive and distinct from themselves. This is actually something that I've been reading about and listening to recently. The psychologist Nicholas Humphrey. He has a really great lecture on YouTube about the evolution of consciousness. That has actually caused me to really start to question um, the conscious awareness for a lot of animals. Because I used to think that things like fish or crustaceans or insects had some level of conscious awareness. Like, obviously it wasn't as sophisticated as like mammals or something, but I used to think that there was some experience that it was like to be a butterfly or to be a lobster or something. But Nicholas Humphrey has actually been causing me to to second guess this a little bit. Um, Specifically, Nicholas Humphrey was one of the first people to observe blind sight, which is where somebody who is blind, but their eyes still work, but their visual cortex is broken. So their experience is of a blind person. They do not experience any vision. They cannot, in their conscious experience of the world, they have no vision, but they can still see. It's crazy. Like they'll do experiments, they'll show them a number and they'll say, "Guess what number we're showing you?" And they're right, like every time. And when you tell them that they're right, they don't believe you. They say, "Well, I can't see anything. How could I possibly know the number?" But their body knows, but their conscious mind doesn't. It's called blind sight. And so Nicholas Humphrey takes this one step further and says, "Well, what if like what if animals like insects, they don't just have blind sight, they have blind touch, blind taste, blind smell, like all of their senses do not have they do not approach the level of a conscious experience. So like a monkey that has blind sight, it can still navigate an obstacle, it can still pick up objects. It doesn't act blind even though it has no conscious experience of sight. So in Humphrey's hypothesis is that only warm-blooded animals even have a conscious experience at all, and that cold-blooded animals, from reptiles to even octopus, which I was really surprised about, he says they don't display sensation-seeking behaviors, as in behaviors that are clearly the only reason to pursue this behavior is to seek a sensation. Like he showed videos of like a swan that was surfing on a wave, like doing stuff for fun, for an experience, for the sensation of it. He says that only warm-blooded animals like mammals and birds have been documented to do these kinds of behaviors, which really has caused almost, like, I wouldn't say a full paradigm shift, but I'm definitely in that kind of territory of changing my mind about what I thought about animal consciousness. Um, and whether or not there is actually an experience that it is like to be a fish, or something it is like to be a reptile or a bug. So yeah, I mean, if you have any thoughts about animal consciousness, let me know on that, because that's a topic that I've been thinking a lot about lately. Um, Sterling Nash said, "I've read somewhere that Dalmatians are really dumb dogs and difficult to train." I don't know. I've never had one either, Sterling. That sounds pretty funny, though. I love Dalmatians, though. I think that they're super cool looking. Um, feel free to think. So, when we talk about crime in New York, for example, okay. Yeah, I've actually never been to New York. It's on my list. I will be going there in a couple years, I'm sure. But from everything I know, crime in New York is a lot lower than it was in the 70s or 80s. So everyone is freaking out about a crime surge in New York. I'm sure it's higher than it was in the 2010s, but it's still nothing compared to the 70s or 80s. So I don't think it's any reason to freak out and lose our minds about. Um, let's see. Oh, like, I was just thinking about the movie 101 Dalmatians too after that last comment. The movie 101 Dalmatians nearly wiped out the breed. They became so inbred that most are deaf and have awful health issues. Wow, I did not know that. So basically, the Dalmatians are like the Habsburgs of dog breeds. That would maybe explain why they have a stereotype of being stupid. Um, so feel free to think, said that blue states are rampant with crime, and the stats we use to prove racial discrepancies are the same stats that are now being manipulated. Um, well, here's a really wild thought. Feel free to think. Um, did you ever think that maybe that it's cities that are full of crime? That maybe urban areas all around the world have a higher crime rate than rural areas? And maybe every major city in America is a blue city. So maybe blue states are just the states that have more urban populations, and maybe urban populations always have higher crime. So to me, it doesn't seem like there's any actual there when people try to say blue states are rampant with crime. It's like, blue states are rampant with urban populations, and urban populations always have more crime. Like, This is about rural versus urban, not about red versus blue. So, yeah, you can definitely misuse statistics, like Feel Free to Think is misusing statistics here. But in reality, there are probably confounding variables that are the actual story going on. Um, and Zach was asking, do you mean it taxonomically? There are taxonomic concepts of race, though we don't use that term anymore. I'm not sure exactly who he was referring to, but I do know that Zach is an expert on arthropods. And he is sort of backing up what I was talking about earlier, that arthropods are extremely robotic in their behaviors. So, Zach, have you ever noticed any arthropods doing any kind of behavior that seems sensation seeking? Do they ever do something just for the fun of it, just to feel the wind flowing through their hair? If you know of any, let me know. Because when Nicholas Humphrey said that about cold blooded versus warm blooded animals, my first thought was, I really want to talk to a herpetologist about this, or like a reptile expert, or like especially like an octopus expert, because octopus have the largest brains of any invertebrates. So if there was going to be any consciousness in the invertebrate group, I would expect that there was to be some sort of experience that it is like to be an octopus. So it really surprised me when Nicholas Humphrey came out and said that he doesn't even think that octopus are conscious. That was a big shocker to me. So I would really like to have a talk with an octopus expert about this and get their opinion on this, to like really to be more sure about what Humphrey was saying. Um, Feel Free to Think was saying that when we can't trust the stats, it seems we are only left with which media source to trust. That's a scary precedence and perfect for the propagandist. Hey, on this much, we can agree. So that's why you can own the only media source that you can trust is Trump's tweets. So let's see. I Killed Earl is a feral animal. Well, okay. Hopefully a conscious one. Um, um, it's actually it doesn't have to be science themed tonight. It can be political too. I mean, I opened the stream by talking about world news, talking about politics. I don't typically have that many debates on politics on this channel. I feel more confident about my knowledge of science than my knowledge of politics, but I'm not opposed to political debates. Um, I honestly, I just like arguing with people. So anybody can call in and talk about anything they want, from politics to science to philosophy. I'm interested in a really large swath of subjects. Um, so Skog Mose says, I am monkey. Yes, yes, we are all monkey. Um, I Killed Earl says, hive animals like bees and ants, I wouldn't think have a sense of individualism. Yeah, I mean, I would not think so either. Um, but it might be the case that no insects have a sense of anything, because having a sense of something kind of implies um, a subject for which to have that sense, a conscious experience. Or subjective awareness to be able to have sensations like that, or feelings. Um, it appears my dad drives with blind sight. That's pretty funny, honestly. Maya was saying that that's weird. I need to read more about the methods he used to come to that conclusion. Yeah, guys, if you search Nicholas Humphrey, Evolution of Consciousness, that lecture should come up. I don't agree with everything that he says in that lecture, because like some of his conclusions are a little bit loony, but it definitely made me think, and potentially has changed my mind and my thinking on the subject of consciousness in the animal kingdom. Don't tell Aaron his snack don't love him. I would be very curious about Aaron's thoughts on this. I mean, the man spends a lot of time with snakes. I mean, if he's probably seen a lot of snake behavior. Definitely. I mean, I have. my cousin freaking loves her bearded dragon. And don't think I would be safe if I told her that bearded dragons don't have conscious experience because, I mean, she dresses hers up in costumes and thinks it's like her best friend. So I would get in trouble if I told her that. Um, uh, Tanya Browns asks, "Will the vote matter? Trump won the last election and still didn't get it." I hate to break it to you, Tanya, but no, he did not. There literally is no good, compelling, or sufficient reason or evidence to think that that is the case. They did recounts. They they tried to have court cases. They couldn't show any evidence that Trump actually won the last election. So I don't know why you would believe that. Um, it just seems like a very obvious lie that Trump would tell. I don't understand why people believe this, to be honest. There just doesn't seem to be any evidence. And I've looked, yeah, I've seen 2000 Mules. I've looked at people's grainy security cam footage. I've seen the affidavits. That none of them are compelling at all, honestly. It's like some guys are like, well, I saw a truck come and deliver a bunch of mail-in ballots. It's like, yeah, well, guess what happens every election? They deliver mail-in ballots by truck. Wow, who would have thought? I mean, seriously, I mean, if you think that there's evidence for this, you can call in and we can talk about it because yeah, I just don't understand why people believe this so thoroughly. But hey, I mean, if it dissuades Trump voters for voting because they just get so nihilistic and say, "What's the point?" Well, it's a good thing, I guess. Um, More people, more crime. Yes, that is a fact. I mean, the more densely you put people, the more crime you're gonna have. Put it on a T-shirt, and on the back of the T-shirt, it can say "More people, more altruism" too. So that's nice. Um, And there are more drugs in higher populated areas and cities. That's also true. Um, oh, and feel free to think. Said good point about the urban populations. So I guess they're feeling agreeable tonight. Good to see. Um, let's see. I Killed Earl refuses to eat octopus. They are extremely intelligent. That's true, but I still kind of like octopus, to be honest. Zach said it's hard to say with cephalopods because they are very exploratory, but it's unclear if there's a pleasure seeking component to it. I do know, like, it's like octopus brains are a little bit weird because they're sort of dispersed, and each of their 8 limbs has its own sort of not a full brain, but like a central bundle of nerves, and each of its tentacles is kind of autonomous and kind of makes its own decisions. So each tentacle kind of, or each arm, uh is sort of doing its own explorations. All 8 of them are sort of exploring their own world. So I really don't know what a conscious experience would be like if each one of your limbs was making its own decisions. I mean, I do know that there are cases for like split brain patients where sometimes like their left arm or maybe their right arm will sort of be outside of their conscious control and will be making their own decisions. Like they'll open their closet in the morning to pick out what outfit they're going to wear, and one arm just starts grabbing clothes, or like they'll be eating cereal and then the left arm will go nope and just smack it. So like that's really weird where one of your limbs seems to have an alternate personality outside of your own conscious experience. I don't know what that's like, but those people are still conscious. So maybe that could be the case for octopus, but it's just really weird to me of what your conscious experience would be like if your limbs were outside of your conscious agency. Like it's just difficult for me to imagine how you would even experience the world like that. Sterling Nash said that his sister has a golden retriever. It was born with a congenital deformity where her eyelid was turned inward and her eyelashes would scratch her cornea. Without surgery, she would go blind. Inbreeding. Yo, that is awful. I am sorry for that. I hope that it got surgery. I hope that that got better. Highball has a political question. Do you think we will be stuck with this two-party system until its demise? Probably. The founding fathers, like George Washington, was really against political parties, and really tried to urge against the formation of political parties. And literally in his own cabinet, political parties started forming. Like almost immediately, political parties started forming. Uh, and generally, what happens is that when you have multiple parties, a lot of times they can form into coalitions that bifurcate into two parties anyway, and two main parties end up forming. Like we had a brief period of time, the era of good feelings, where there was just one party essentially, and then eventually that just gave way to an opposition. So unless it's like, it's hard to imagine how it would go away. I mean, I don't think it would go away into a one-party system. I think the most likely way that the US would transition away from a two-party system would be if both parties split relatively simultaneously in one election cycle. Like if the Democrats split into like liberals and progressives, and the Republicans split into like MAGA and rhinos, then you could have like a sort of four axle political environment at that point. That's the only really way that I could see us getting away from a two party, is if both parties split in the same election cycle. Um, and we've got a few more comments here. But I see that we have a call in. So I'm going to give precedence here to Mr. Anderson. Welcome, sir. Thank you for calling in.
Hey, how you doing?
Doing really well. I don't know if you had a chance to overhear the format for these streams, but since this is still early days, we don't have that many callers in, so that's pretty relaxed. But if there is any specific thing that you wanted to talk about, we can absolutely go into any topic that suits your fancy. Did you have a particular reason why you were calling in, or you just wanted to hang out?
Well, I mean, I have multiple reasons. The selfish reason is, of course, you're a big deal, and I want to sponge off your success. But
likewise, my friend. Likewise.
No, I was just, I just wanted to support you. Is kind of where I'm coming from.
Well, thank you.
One thing that
I feel.
What's that?
Thank you. I feel supported.
No, of course. I mean, we gotta work together, right? Yeah, no, I mean, I want this. I want your stream to be a success, and so I figured, why not just call in when I had a second. I heard you were talking about.
Bless us with Mr. Anderson here. You've already got people in my chat saying that I should rewatch The Matrix. It's like a
subtle nod, right? Like it's like, it's like I'm not like explicitly like hitting people over the head with it, but like everybody seems to make that connection, and I'm like fine with that.
Is that not the reference? I thought it was the reference.
No, it was supposed to be a private joke, but everybody gets it.
Okay. Yeah, it's not too subtle. Sorry,
it was not.
Off to share that. What were you saying?
Oh, I was just saying that. So I saw that you were talking about like two-party systems versus multi-party systems and that sort of thing. You were saying that if both the Democrats and the Republicans split in the same election cycle, that maybe you could have a multi-party system.
Yep.
And no, but the two-party system is an artifact of the electoral system that you have. And so even if both parties fragmented into 8 parties or 10 parties, let's say, both of them, so you had 20 parties in total, it would be not long before it was back to being a two-party system. And that's
because of the winner-take-all dynamics of the Electoral College?
Not the Electoral College. The Electoral College is even worse, but it's not the Electoral College that's the problem. It's what they call the first past the post electoral system. So that's the the way that you do elections, we do them the same way in Canada. Is, you know, and in Canada, sometimes we do have, you know, more than two parties, but there will be two major ones, right? And the other ones will be like also rans. And almost everybody will strategically vote for one of the two major parties, because if I vote for my first choice, then that could mean that my least favorite party is going to win. And so because it's winner take all, because I can win with just a plurality, like, you know, if I have 31% of the vote, even though 69% of people don't want me to win, I have more than anybody else, I'm going to win, right? And so it really kind of, it forces everybody to strategically vote for their favorites. Now, like, the interesting thing is that there are lots of other countries with lots of parties, right? And so it's like, well, how is that possible? And the answer is that they have different voting systems. Like, the way that you guys do it there and that we do it here is not the only way. In fact, it's not even the best way. It's probably like, pick any other voting system and it's better. Like, you know, they all have their strengths and weaknesses, but like, first past the post is the worst. It's straight up the worst.
Yeah,
So, like,
I mean, you
yeah.
know, we do have, I think, the oldest living constitution of any democracy on the planet. So
Yeah.
it was definitely a sort of guinea pig kind of experiment in democracy. And I'm sure that
Oh yeah.
there are other countries that do have better electoral systems to have a truly more multipolar democracy. And that's a really good point, where it is a sort of structural issue in like the actual way that elections are run that fosters this sort of polar axis of political parties just to form naturally. Because, like I said, I mean, a lot of the founding fathers were against the formation of political parties, and as soon as they enacted the system, they formed almost immediately after. Like during George Washington's administration, they were
Yeah,
forming.
because
So
it's pragmatic, right? And like, it wouldn't even take very much change, like very many changes to improve the voting system. Like, you know, say for example, you could do, have you ever heard of instant runoff?
not instant runoff, no.
So instant runoff is where instead of, well, so first let's just talk about what runoff is, right? So even the political parties in their like primaries, they sometimes use this, where it's like, you have a vote, and then like, let's say there's 5 candidates, right? And nobody gets more than 50%. Then you just drop the bottom one, and then you do it again. And then everybody votes again. And then if somebody doesn't have more than 50%, you drop the bottom guy and you do it again. And you should do that until somebody has more than 50%, right? And you know, that way, like, at least you're gonna get the person, like, then that way you're not gonna waste your vote by voting for a third party, right?
So
Instant runoff is, go ahead.
here's 2 ideas that I want to get your thoughts on. People are making some propositions in the chat. First of all, do you have any thoughts on ranked choice voting?
That's what instant runoff is.
Ah,
Same thing.
I know about ranked choice. I haven't heard it referred to as instant runoff.
Yeah, because what happens is that the bottom person, so you rank your choices, right? And then they put all of your votes in your first choice, right? And if that person, if number one, there isn't more than 50% of the vote, then the bottom person, they take all of their votes and they distribute them to the various ones in number 2, right? So you don't have to come back and vote again, right? And so then number 2 gets, you know, so the bottom person, all of their votes go to those people's number 2 choices, and then you just continue to do that until somebody's got more than 50.
This
And
is
there you go.
this is a pretty funny way of figuring out who you should vote for. Basically, when you cannot logically decide between parties, go and ask an insufferable fool and then vote the opposite of whatever they say. I thought that's a pretty fun strategy, I think. But do you have any thoughts on blockchain and voting?
blockchain, I mean, why would you use the blockchain to vote?
So I think the idea behind this that I've generally seen crypto bros talking about is the idea that the blockchain is basically like it provides an immutable list, like a public
Hmm.
immutable list that everybody can see. Um,
Hmm.
so it does lead, I would think, to issues of,
That's not good.
everybody can see how you voted. I don't
Yeah,
know.
that's not good.
Maybe they could only see how you voted if they knew your ID, and the IDs could be private. But I think the idea is that it's a lot more like open and transparent in terms of like avoiding voter fraud. I think is the idea, and that it would be so much faster
Voter
because
voter fraud is not a big problem
I
in
agree with
elections,
I,
right?
I
Like
I do
like
agree with you on that, but I just want to finish up this point because I hear them make this point that basically if if vote if voting was done on the blockchain, then it's basically transparent for people to see that there's no shenanigans happening, which at least is for their confidence. Not that it actually addresses a real issue that we're going through with voter fraud, but
mm,
and then the idea that it's basically instant counting. Like you can verify that your vote went through, you can see it on the blockchain, and the votes could be tallied relatively instantly overnight. It's just a more technologically sophisticated way of voting. That's the way that I've heard it being pitched. I don't know if you have any thoughts.
I mean, in terms of creating unique identifiers and recording the information, like, I mean, I guess, right? But the problem then is essentially you're going to be recording people's votes. And I assume you're going to be recording it with identifying information if it's going to have any value whatsoever, right? Because otherwise, what's the point,
Yeah.
right? If you're only going to be recording votes, you don't need a blockchain, right?
Yeah,
It,
it could
you're,
be that your ID that's used, like you would have a string of numbers and letters that would be your
Mhm,
ID on the blockchain. And maybe the
mhm.
idea is that that could be tied to your identity, but only you and like the voting, like the electoral agency would know who that is. And maybe it wouldn't be public knowledge about which ID is you. But again, I don't know.
Sure,
I
you
don't
could do
see
that. I
it.
mean, have you ever heard of like one of the cool things that they have with cryptography these days is this idea that you can have like a public key and a private key, where I can prove to you that I know something. I can prove to you that I'm me without actually. Uh, I can prove to you that I know something without actually allowing you to know that thing,
That's a cool idea. Yeah, I
right?
that would be maybe a good way to do it. Honestly, I don't
Yeah.
see a huge need for the blockchain in voting. Like I think sure
No.
it could be cool to think about how such a system could run, but I don't really see the huge glaring need or
If you're going to
problem.
change your voting, if you're going to change voting, like the thing that you need most is not the blockchain. It is proportional representation or multiple votes or runoff systems or literally anything else besides
Yeah.
first past the post.
The thing that I would like to see is I would like to see each person's vote be counted equally. I mean, pretty radical, pretty crazy idea, but I would like to see it to where, whether or not you're a person in Wyoming or a person in California, maybe your vote is worth equal amounts of weight in determining the outcome. I don't think that that's too too insane to think.
It's an interesting idea. Um, I mean, the problem is that uh, then your vote's not going to be tied to geography, and then what that's going to mean is that there'll be a tyranny of the majority with respect to like urban voters versus rural voters, and like there'll be huge swaths of the country that essentially will have no representation or very little representation or say because and whose issues are like somewhat distinct, right? And so like
Mhm.
balancing those interests is like the reason why you have districts that are tied to geography, right? I mean,
Yeah.
one of the ways that they balance that is something called the mixed member proportional chamber. Have you ever heard of that?
Mixed member proportional chamber. I have not. Elucidate me.
No. Yeah. So the idea is that you actually have So let's say we took your House of Representatives, right? And
Maya's calling you out here.
Yeah, I mean, look, like the problem is that yes, it is democracy, and that's good, but you have to have, like, democracy is built on the ideas, like twin ideas of majority rule and minority protection, right? And so tyranny of the majority is an evil of democracy that we guard against. That's why we have things like individual rights, because otherwise you'd have those crazy situations that you hear in utilitarian arguments all the time, where it's like, well, greatest good for greatest number, so that means that we should kill a healthy person so that we can save 8 sick people by giving them the organs, right?
How do you think about Maya's proposition here that the president, since he's representing all of us, should be elected by popular vote? The House and the Senate are where proportional representation can come in.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. And in fact, so I was just going to tell you about mixed member proportional representation, which is the idea is that you would, so imagine this. Let's take your Senate, right? And we're gonna so every state right now has 2 senators, right? Let's cut that in half and let's make it 1 senator. And then let's have the other half of them elected by pure majority, right? So like they could be anything, right?
Like a
Or you could do it with the House of
majority?
Commons. You could do it with the House of Commons too. Like, doesn't matter, right? But like, say like half of it is done, by writing and stuff, and half of it like is done like each member is not responsible to a specific riding, isn't tied to anything. It's just purely like, okay, the Green Party got 6% of the vote overall, right? Which usually, like in your system, would mean they get 0 seats, right? Unless all 6% was concentrated in one geographic region, right? It would mean they came in 5th in, or worse in every riding, right? But in this situation, they would then they have 6% of the vote, they get 6% of those available seats, right? And so there'd be a whole bunch of little parties that would get little small amounts of a whole bunch of
isn't that
little seats.
Isn't that how the electoral system works in India?
Works that way in lots of places.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know India is the largest democracy on earth, just in terms of the number of people voting in democratic elections. And they do have a relatively high number of different parties, but I mean, I wouldn't exactly look to India as because I mean,
Well,
they're
yeah,
kind of
what happens is that like the problem with that system is that you end up with coalition governments almost all the time.
Yep, exactly.
Right? Because it's very unusual for one party to have a majority of all the votes. You end up with a conglomerate, and then you're having to negotiate. Even when you form the government, you're having to negotiate, and so those kinds of governments, like, the fear is that they're not as decisive, right? But I mean, it's not like your current system is a particularly decisive one at this time anyways. So I don't know that it would necessarily be a step backwards.
Tanya Brown did respond about Trump winning the 2020 election, in her words. And she says that at least 4 court cases found there to be fraud. Citation needed for that. And they said they didn't do full checks because each individual case was not enough to sway the result. So it's really interesting to me, because if you say that each of these cases that I'm not even sure they exist, but just taking your word that they do exist, if each one of these cases was not enough to sway the result, then why did your previous comment say that Trump actually won the election? Like, if the cases here didn't sway the result was not that Trump won the last time I checked.
Yeah, that's accurate. And
he says that she was watching.
As I recall, I mean, and I'm not even an American, right? So, what can I say? But
now here's really what I find is a lot of people's response. They were watching the count live, and then when they went to bed, the results changed when they woke up because they finished counting the votes. And Tanya, I'm not sure, and Mr. Anderson, I'm not sure if this is how it works in Canada, but here they don't add the mail-in ballots until they finish counting the in-person ballots. So like they
Yeah.
finish counting the ones that they have in person, and then they add in all the mail ballots. And so when you had in 2020, one candidate was telling all of his supporters, do not vote by mail. Like Trump said, don't vote by mail. Vote, you need to vote in person. And then the other candidate was saying, you should vote by mail because there's literally a pandemic happening right now. So, like, it makes sense that the vast majority of mail in votes were not from the guy telling all his supporters not to vote by mail. I mean, this makes total logical sense to me. I don't know why anyone would see this and think that there were some massive shenanigans at play.
It was actually expected. It was predicted before any of the
Yes,
votes were counted,
the
right?
red mirage.
And I was going to say the red mirage, right? And it was yeah, that was something that they knew going in
I Killed
was
Earl
going to
brings
happen.
up that each fraud case was either a mistake or a Trump voter voting illegally. It's funny because I know exactly two people, like I actually know them in real life, that did do voter fraud. And in both cases, they voted twice for Trump using a deceased relative as a second vote for Trump. And they admitted this to me. And their rationale was, well, I already knew that the Democrats were going to be cheating. So I had to cheat to try to offset the cheating that I knew would be going on. And that there are two people that I know in real life that both did that. And they both voted twice for Trump using dead relatives of theirs. So anecdotal, but come on. I mean,
Yep. No, that's consistent with the stories that I've heard as
yeah,
well.
and this is consistent with the stories that I had heard, Maya, that none of the cases were decided in Trump's favor. I don't know about these four cases that Tanya brought up, but yeah, every single case failed in court.
My understanding was that there was one that could arguably be considered a partial victory.
Okay, I had not heard of that.
Like not really, but you could say you could argue that one of them was sort of a partial victory.
Is
That
this
was
true,
my
Mr.
understanding.
Anderson, that you don't have dead people voting or multiple votes per person in Canada because they have a great counting system? Is this true?
You know what kind of counting system we have in Canada?
You're my Canadian correspondent, so you tell me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's called hand counting,
Wow,
right?
sophisticated.
Yeah, no, it's crazy, right? So like when you show up, it works fine. We don't have super long lines, and we don't have these problems with hanging chads and pregnant ballots and all this kind of stuff, because what we do is you have a pencil and there are boxes on a piece of paper, and you check one of those boxes and you make sure that the check mark is all the way inside the box, and then you fold that up and you put it in another box. And
Wow.
then there are people, at least one person from each party and in each riding, each candidate gets to nominate a person or persons who sit there and watch the ballot box to make sure that the only pieces of paper that are going in there are from the voters. So you just have people there that each side trusts, making sure that there's no shenanigans, and
Now,
then you count them and you have all of the pieces of paper all in front of you, and the only pieces of paper in the room are the ones that should be there.
now the
And then
issue
you all watch each other sort them into piles, and whoever's pile is the biggest wins.
now the issue with our system here in the US is that we have those drop boxes for ballots, but the people watching them are literally just the crazies. Like it's like people just showing up to watch these drop boxes because they're like, I know that these demon rats are gonna try to steal the election. Trump told me I got to be vigilant, and then like they think that they see something suspicious and then go threaten them with a gun or something. Like it's like kind of like a huge safety issue of like all of these vigilante election watchers that are just like patrolling the streets on election night with their guns, like looking for the Democrats who are trying to steal the election. And it can get pretty hairy. Sydney
Yeah.
Raptor was asking, in the US, can you vote at any voting booth if you are out of your local area? Or is there that
No.
what mail-in ballot voting is for? So um, when I was out of state for an election, I did mail in my ballot to my home state. So I would not have been able to vote out of state. If I was voting in Texas, but I was in California at the time of the elections, I would need the mail-in ballot to Texas.
Unless you were in university, in which case you could vote in the district where your university is.
Yeah, if you have an address, I think that's true. I don't know if you don't have an address there. I don't know what the
Yeah.
case is for that.
Typically, that's my understanding anyway.
Yeah, Monkey at the typewriter saying it depends on the state, and yeah, that a lot of these poll
Oh, I gotta
watchers
go.
are
I'll be
doing
back.
voter intimidation. What were you saying? What'd you say, Mr. Anderson? Oh, he appears to have frozen. Maybe he was saying that his people need him and he must go. Um, but yeah, guys, we don't have anyone else in the queue for tonight. I don't know where the creationists, the flat earthers have gone. But yeah, I think I'm going to start winding down the stream here. This was pretty fun, just getting to talk about what was new in the world and getting to hear from you guys. Um, and yeah, getting to learn a little bit more about electoral politics ahead of what's sure to be a very interesting election year, at least here for the US, the ramifications of which do affect the whole human species. I mean, just the amount of nuclear weapons here and the fact that basically like the president has the sole deciding authority of how and when to use them, especially if somebody else uses nukes. I think that the president has about 6 minutes to make their own personal decision about how to respond, which is insane. 6 minutes is not enough to decide basically anything. So yeah, the whoever is the president of the United States is a hugely big deal for like the fate of all, not just humans, but for like most animals on Earth. Pretty big deal. So hopefully that goes well. Hopefully this ruling in Arizona is a good sign for Rovember to come. I mean, literally, the Democrats could end up winning just on this one singular issue. So yeah. Um, yeah, maybe Mr. Anderson was raptured. Maybe it was just delayed after the eclipse. But yeah, thank you all for joining this stream tonight. I really enjoyed seeing all of your comments in the live chat. Please like the stream and please leave a comment on the actual video after the stream is done. That massively helps out with the algorithm. And yes, I do want to do these streams weekly, so I will be back next Thursday at the same time to talk about all the news that happens between now and then. So if there's any articles, if there's any news, if there's any new science that comes out that you guys want me to talk about, please message me. I'm on Discord. I also have my email address in the channel's about section. It's at criticalbasedinquiry, singular, at gmail.com. Criticalbasedinquiry@gmail.com. Heck yeah, I Killed Earl said it was a great stream. They'll definitely be making this a weekly stop. I love to hear that. I hope that you guys will join us again next week. Hopefully, some people will come out that have some ideas that they want to debate about. And yeah, we can get into it. Maybe some race realists, maybe some flat earthers, you know. And I'd love to talk about the rapture. I know Tanya was going off about how the rapture really is biblical. I would love to debate whether or not the rapture is going to be happening soon. So if any of those Christians are out there listening, and they want to try to make the argument that the rapture is going to happen soon within our lifetimes, I would love to have that debate. So yes, guys, if you just have a question that you want to ask, somebody emailed me saying that they wanted to ask about large scale structures in the universe. I love science questions. I love politics, philosophy, etc. So yes, we will join next week, next Thursday, and we will be talking about all the happenings that are relevant to humanity and science in the week ahead then. So be sure to tune in for another one of these based theory streams. And remember to stay curious, keep learning, and subscribe for more. Anyways,